interviewing owner of McDane's Restaurant in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. And I've got now with me in studio news director for American Family News, Fred Jackson. And Fred, you have all kinds of stories that come across your desk, all kinds of things that you're covering and looking at, and you are familiar with this story. I want to get your take on it. How did you feel when you read it and maybe saw some video clips, kids being banned from restaurants?
Yeah, it's a very unusual story, and I guess I came at it. I'm a dad and a husband. We brought up our two girls back in the 80s. And I try to put myself in the position of my wife and I and our two girls walking up to a restaurant and seeing a sign, no kids allowed.
Yes.
And boy, that would make me upset.
Yeah.
So I understand parents reacting to that. However, my wife and I now, our girls are all grown up. My wife and I are old, we're in our 50s. And I thought the other side of this is, okay, let's say I'm taking my wife out for an anniversary dinner. And I would kind of like to go to a spot that's kind of quiet. It's a special occasion to celebrate together. And, wouldn't want a restaurant that's kind of got a lot of rowdiness in it and that kind of thing. We'd want a nice, quiet anniversary dinner. So we would look for that kind of environment. So I kind of see both sides of this. But honestly, Meeky, I think perhaps what we're seeing in this story is more of a manifestation of a problem. It's a symptom of a problem. And I think today, and having listened to Mike in a news piece earlier, he was really talking about, parents have the right to bring up their children in the way that they want.
Okay.
And if they're negligent in some areas of bringing up their kids, i.e. not disciplining them and teaching them how they should behave in public, then, parents, you have a right to do that. But the question is, Mom and Dad, do you have the right to impose that parenting choice on the public?
Okay, so now, but you're making the case that unruly children should not be tolerated. And we don't have to be subjected to that. But say, for example, I have a ruly 5-year-old, if you will. I have a kid who is well behaved, or maybe I have a newborn and they sleep like 60% of the time, and I walk up to the restaurant with my husband and I see a sign that says, pets okay, children not so much.
Yeah.
Am I to be okay with that?
But that's where it's tough. Unfortunately, if Mike has made his decision, and he obviously has, that he has decided that his restaurant is going to cater to a certain clientele. And obviously in this case, it's kids. I think kids are allowed. They just have to, 6 and under are not.
Are not allowed,
so
right.
Older kids are okay with Mom and Dad. There's a couple of things there. It's the kind of thing that he's a private businessman. He can make that decision. And I understand that the reaction has been pretty good to his decision. So he has decided, I can make a go of this business, this restaurant business, by catering to a clientele voided of bringing their kids if they're 6 and under. But, it's tough, but maybe parents have to think a little bit more, and this is the broader story in all of this, about the idea that I have a responsibility, Mom and Dad have a responsibility to bring up their kids to respect other environments and other adults when they're outside the house. And if you teach that kind of thing, for example, when my wife and I were back, when our girls were growing up back in the 80s, we lived in Canada.
Okay.
But my wife is from the South, from Mississippi. And so quite often her parents would like her to come down with the girls to visit. I couldn't get away because I was working. So they would fly back and forth. Very often, Susie would tell me afterwards, Susie, my wife, would tell me she would get compliments from people traveling that our girls were well behaved. And I would think about that, and I wouldn't think that we had done anything special. But one thing we did is we taught our girls and conversed with them as adults. And that as in certain situations like this, there's a time for play and hollering in the backyard and around our house. But when you're out in public, whether it's church or a restaurant or on an airplane, you know, you have to behave differently.
Good.
You have to respect the presence of others. And you know, I don't think we give kids credit enough many times. We just think in the back of our mind, well, at 3 years old, they just don't understand that. Kids understand at a very early age.
Certainly more than we think they do.
More than what we think they do. So this is an encouragement to mom and dads out there with little ones. You can teach your kids at a very young age how to behave themselves. Now, I understand, kids, little one, teething.
Right.
I mean, you're not
you can't control that.
You're not going to hold them accountable for that behavior. But you know, when they get up beyond that, you can say, this is right and this is wrong. We have a responsibility as parents to do that, but you're also helping that little one too, to learn skills, discipline that they're going to need throughout life.
You know, this is good, and you touched on a subject, and this is really good because it's a nice segue into the next segment of our show. We're going to actually talk about church and how this kind of system of dealing with kids has trickled into church, and we'll have Buddy Smith on the show coming up next break, and Pastor John Snyder. Make sure you stay close. You don't want to miss this topic. The conversation is going to continue. And Fred, I didn't get to ask you because I wanted to know if this is the kind of trend that's catching on across the board in the way that we deal with children. You know, is our culture becoming less child-friendly? And that's a bigger issue that we haven't broached yet, but hopefully we'll be able to do that coming up. How can our viewers keep up with the news that you guys are covering?
Well, American Family News, American Family Radio has over 200 radio stations across the country. We provide the newscast at the top of the clock for that. And then there is onenewsnow.com, our news site. You can go there 24 hours a day to keep up to date.
onenewsnow.com. Meek is back in 2 minutes.